Good afternoon and welcome to Vital Idaho here on KRBX Radio Boise, where we focus on issues of interest of folks here in the Treasure Valley. I'm your host, Beth Markley. Last year, a program to feed kids during the summer months when free and reduced school meals are traditionally not available was scrapped from the state budget. My guest today to talk about how that happened, the impacts, and what we do to move forward, if there's any way to do that, is anti-hunger advocate Dawn Pierce. Dawn, thanks so much for joining me today on Vital Idaho.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Okay, so now let's talk about the program in question, how it got started, how Idaho lawmakers were initially poised to continue it. Who would have benefited?
So who would have benefited would be children who received free and reduced meals at school. Mm-hmm. And this would be during the summer. Children on our Indian reservations, because the program has different rules than food stamps. But how it started was from the pandemic, when school was out and kids weren't getting their lunches, mm-hmm. and parents were not knowing how they were going to feed their kids for lunch. Because if you have a food budget, you spend X amount of dollars. And if you then need to take those resources and buy lunch, it can be taxing. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of born out of the pandemic EBT program, electronic benefits transfer. But it had different rules. It had different eligibility requirements. So it was kind of a guide, but not a continuation of pandemic EBT. Summer EBT was its own thing. So pandemic EBT is done, and states are opting into it. And Idaho, the first time it was available, would have been in 2023, and the state did not opt in at that time. The reason being, and I understand capacity for nonprofits, I understand capacity for state agencies is limited. Mm-hmm. And so the previous superintendent of public instruction stated that their office didn't have the capacity to send attendance information and who of the students receives free meals to the Department of Health and Welfare. So they just didn't do it. And
so how much this was in 2023, how much are we talking about, and how many children were affected?
It was about $15 million, mm-hmm. and about 107,000 children were affected. And I understand that we have summer programs to help feed children during the summer, but this would have been an amazing complement to the summer food service program. Sometimes people call it Picnic in the Park, mm-hmm. Where more rural families would have benefited from this, because like in North Idaho, if you live in Orofino, you either have to go to Kuski or to Kamiah, and that's an hour away each direction to get your lunch. So this would have really been a benefit to rural families.
And this was federal money, right? This $15 million would have come, and so it would have been on the state's burden to figure out how to administer it to receive that $15 million.
Correct.
So instead, the decision was just to let it go.
Correct.
How many states elected to do this?
In total, 30.
30 states elected to opt out or
opt in.
Opt in. Okay.
And now that has increased for this year, as well as 2 tribal nations in Oklahoma. The state of Oklahoma didn't opt in, but because the tribal nations are sovereign, mm-hmm. and they administer and do their own WIC, they were able to apply for the summer EBT on their own.
Okay.
So it's interesting that Oklahoma itself is not participating, but the 2 tribal nations there are.
So that is separate from the summer EBT program that we're talking about that was eliminated for this in this past session?
No, it's the same program.
It's the same program. So what happened in this past session?
The past session. So we at the Idaho Hunger Relief Task Force and Hunger Free America, we sent a sign-on letter, and we had lots of community signatures. We had the mayor, we had St. Luke's, we had state leaders, and we sent a letter to the governor, to Dave Jeppesen, and to Debbie Critchfield.
And Dave Jeppesen was at the time the head of the Department of Health and Welfare. Debbie Critchfield over the Department of Education.
Correct.
So
we sent those letters, and they let us know, all 3 of them, the departments said that, yeah, we'll put this in our budgets. So Health and Welfare put it in their budget because the states, when it was pandemic EBT, the USDA paid for the whole program. Mm-hmm. After they revamped it and made it summer EBT, then the states needed to provide half of the cost for the program, and the USDA provided the other half. Mm-hmm. And for Idaho, that was $800,000. That was their half. And so the Department of Health and Welfare put half of the half in their budget, and so did the Department of Ed. And then those budgets, after they're done, they then go to the governor, and then the governor does his budget, and it was in the governor's budget. And we were very excited. Everybody is going in front of JFAC. And the Department of Health and Welfare's budget was voted on and sent to the Senate with a due pass recommendation. Mm-hmm. Department of Education's budget voted on by JFAC, sent to the Senate floor with a due pass recommendation. We were very excited. They're 16-4. And then the Senate happened. There was a lot of misinformation, not floating around, but flying around, regarding what summer EBT was and was not. Some of our state senators are on record saying that it's just another welfare program. We're going to turn Idaho into a welfare state. And that's not true, actually. And another senator is on record as stating that kids are going, what's to stop a child from going to a liquor store and buying a Monster drink with this summer money? And, one senator was on record stating that she was concerned because there weren't work requirements for children to receive this money. Another senator stated that, this is just going to teach our kids that getting things for free is fun. Mm-hmm. And then there was a senator who stated that any kid whose parents make six figures is going to get free food. And that's not the case. None of those things are true.
So it sounds like they were prepared with these talking points. Let's talk about where that came from. What happened? So there were a lot of things flying around, misinformation, out and out lies. And those misinformation, I don't know that it's blatant. I can't say that it is. I don't think that that's a fair statement. But the more conservative faction of our state and their organizations were the ones who were feeding this misinformation to the senators. And in trying to bring attention to that misinformation with those organizations, they were not going to hear it. Mm-hmm. We're talking, I just want to call it out. We know we're talking about the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Right?
And the Idaho Freedom Caucus.
And the Idaho Freedom Caucus, okay. Which is very concerned with reducing, benefits programs and things like this, and also reducing the amount of money that Idaho takes from the federal government. Right. So did you speak with any of the
I did. Okay. I spoke with the vice president of the Freedom Foundation. Her name is Allie. Mm-hmm. Nice woman. We don't see eye to eye on anything, I don't think. But when I talked to her and I sent her U.S. code, I sent her, the law. Mm-hmm. I sent her the standard operating procedure for summer EBT from the USDA. I sent her things from the Federal Register, and her comment to me in an email was, our political director has thoroughly investigated and has done his due diligence. We stand behind him. He is never wrong.
So what he was saying was that all of these things that popped up during the Senate hearing, were true. Was information fed to them by
But with all of that information, it was 0 hour. The Health and Welfare bill was sent back from the Senate to JFAC to take out summer EBT because they weren't having it, and so there was not enough time to correct this information. Mm-hmm. And I sat there in JFAC sobbing, watching this amazing program go down And there was nothing I could do to help parents. There was nothing I could do to make sure that they didn't go to bed. They didn't go to bed crying because they didn't know how they're going to feed their kid this summer because they don't have that extra funds to buy the extra food for the lunch.
Tell me about, let's pull back a little bit and just talk a little bit about food insecurity in Idaho, just in general. How many kids are we talking about? What does that mean?
So the Food Research Action Center estimated that it would be 107,000 kids in Idaho that would benefit. And that's not a lot of kids. I mean, that's the size of Meridian? It's not a ton of kids. 107,000 kids is not going to create a welfare state in Idaho. And the ones that would qualify would be the ones that are getting free and reduced meals anyway. They would automatically be enrolled in summer EBT just on the fact that their families are already receiving SNAP or WIC, our tribal neighbors. So, I mean, that's who it would have helped. It would have helped the kids. It's not going to create a welfare state.
And in terms of Idaho compared to the rest of the nation, tell me a little bit. You showed me a chart about Idaho children and benefits and so forth. What does that show you about the rest of the United States? Well,
it shows us that Idaho is last in taking care of its children. We used to be 49th, but new data just released actually a couple days ago shows that Idaho is dead last in taking care of their kids. And I would hope that our lawmakers would be more concerned with taking care of children as opposed to creating some sort of welfare state where everybody's happily taking benefits and eating bonbons and not doing anything all day long.
Right. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about where we go from here, and also a little bit, like, you bring some personal background to this, and I want you to share with us whatever you're comfortable with.
All right.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Programming on Radio Boise is supported in part by Boise Weekly, offering investigative journalism and extensive coverage of the local arts and entertainment community. An electronic version of the weekly offers an alternative to standard print and is available on their website under the e-edition tab. More information at boiseweekly.com.
Radio Boise presents So Long Summer, a fundraiser for your community radio station, featuring Turtle Poppers, The Fightin' McGinty's, and KDG and the Half Max on Tuesday, August 27th at Shrine Social Club. Doors at 7 p.m., all ages. Tickets and more info at shrinesocialclub.com.
If you are struggling with a mental or emotional problem, having trouble with drugs or alcohol, having family or relationship problems, reach out. Idaho Crisis and Suicide Hotline can help. Call or text 988. You can call for yourself or someone you care about.
And we're back. If you're just joining us, this is Vital Idaho, and I am talking with Dawn Pierce, anti-hunger advocate Dawn Pierce, about the summer EBT program, which was scrapped at the last minute at last year's legislative session. And Dawn, you're obviously very passionate. I mean, it's hard not to be passionate about hungry kids. But tell me a little bit about the passion that you bring to this, your personal experience.
My passion comes from a lived experience with hunger and poverty and being a hunger and poverty survivor myself. In 2010, at the height of the Great Recession, my boss laid off his whole entire office. I was working for a bankruptcy attorney, and I felt that it was quite odd, sad, and concerning that people couldn't even afford to file for bankruptcy. So I found myself needing a job. And at a time where there were no jobs to be had, I've been a nurse for 34 years. I was also a paralegal. I couldn't find a job. And it took, about 3 weeks for me to start receiving unemployment. Things were backlogged because of recession. And during that time, my food supply at home is dwindling. I had a teenage son. And I decided that if I was going to feed him, that we were going to have to ask for help. And that was hard for me. I sat in the parking lot at Health and Welfare for an hour crying before I went in, because I was in a situation I never thought I'd be in. I mean, in Idaho, we're supposed to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and you give a man a fish and you feed him for a day and you teach him to fish and you feed him for a lifetime and all of those stoic things. But here I was needing help, and I've always been self-sufficient. And, there were times where my son would come home and say, "Hey, Mom, I need cookies for something." It's like, well, I didn't plan that in the budget.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There was a lady at Winco, and I wish I knew her. I wish I knew her name, because I would thank her now. But I was buying groceries on the first of the month. I had a cart full of groceries because you plan for the whole month. And she turned around and looked at me. We were at Winco downtown, May 1st, 2011 at 1:30 in the afternoon. And she looked at me, and there was a woman in front of her who had a ton of groceries. And of course, she's buying with her SNAP benefits. And she said, "I should have known better than to come to the store on the first of the month with all these losers and their food stamps. Don't you feel the same?"
Well,
yeah. And and I told her that that I'm paying for my groceries with food stamps, and so she must think I'm quite a loser as well. And not only that, I work for the state because I was working for the Attorney General's office at the time. I had finally gotten a job, and was working for the Attorney General's office, but still qualified for SNAP. And I don't know if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have been so angry and felt that I needed to do something. I mean, and then she told me that I didn't look like I was on food stamps, and I didn't know I had to look like something. But I just always thought I looked like me. But it was through that moment, and then just like this weird series of events that happened in my life, that I found myself like sitting right here talking about it and fighting for people, and taking all of those crying parents and their hearts and their souls with me every time that I talk about hunger, and every time I talk about poverty, and every time I talk about hungry kids. Kids don't choose to go hungry.
Right.
So I don't know why we take things out on children to prove some adult point that really isn't even a point.
That's based on misinformation.
Absolute misinformation.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the Hunger Coalition that you work with, and what do we do from here? How do we get this?
I am the board president for the Idaho Hunger Relief Task Force. We are an amazing organization. We're more like an umbrella organization where we have lots of partners underneath us. We used to have a SNAP into Action plan, which is where we did outreach regarding people getting on benefits. There's 29% of Idahoans who qualify for SNAP who aren't on SNAP. And so we try to reach those people. The same with WIC, and we've now kind of morphed it into the SNAP WIC engagement team. We do a lot of advocacy work. That's kind of my wheelhouse. We do fresh fruits and veggies prescription produce program, where people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic go to their primary care. They feel that they would benefit from fresh fruits and vegetables, and then they get prescriptions for fresh fruits and vegetables to add that into their diet. And we've seen actually A1C numbers, the diabetic markers, actually go down with this program.
Wow.
It's been amazing. We actually taught St. Luke's our program, and now they administer their own fresh fruits and vegetable produce prescription program.
Fantastic.
And then my day job, I guess, is the National Community Organizing Manager with Hunger Free America, and we're a national organization that does a lot of benefits access work. We also administer and run the National Hunger Hotline on behalf of the USDA. And so we have that, and we do a lot of policy and advocacy work with Hunger Free America.
So we have just a few minutes left. Kids are back in school, at least in Idaho. What do we have a path forward?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Share that.
We have a path forward. So, and there is another chance. There are as many chances until Idaho opts in, and then we're golden. We can do this year after year if they want. I'm up for it, but Idaho should opt in. And the path forward is education. We need to have our facts. We need to have our U.S. code. We need to have the information from the USDA become louder than the Idaho Freedom Foundation's misinformation. And when facts are louder than misinformation, Idaho's kids will win. And anybody, go to idahohunger.org for the the task force, and hungerfreeamerica.org, and we would love to have anybody help who wants to advocate for just feeding some kids over the summer. I mean, it's just 107,000 kids. Might be more now, might be less. I don't know, but that was the last figures I got. Write to your member at the State House. Call them. Go testify. If you are on SNAP and you would have benefited from this program and you struggled this summer, when the legislature's in session, go to the State House. Talk in those committees. Tell them your story. Because I still have faith that lived experience stories matter to lawmakers.
Oh, I believe so. I mean, people want to know what's going on with their neighbors. And now that you have these talking points and you have very specific ideas about what the argument is against this program, will you be able to be prepared to go to those committee meetings and give legislators those talking points?
Oh, I'm highly prepared.
I would imagine. We are
very prepared. And anybody who wants to get just as prepared can go to the task force website, idahohunger.org, and just fill in the contact information little box, and I will reach out to you.
That's fabulous.
I will teach anybody, and anybody can come and educate with me and advocate for kids.
And what about that parent who finds themselves in that position who needed to ask for help? What are the first 2 or 3 things that they should do? You did mention a hunger hotline.
We do. The first thing they need to do is take a deep breath. And maybe have a glass of iced tea because it's going to be okay. I promise it will be okay. Maybe not right now, but there will be a day that you're sitting at a radio station talking about your story and how important it is to feed children. And then you can call the National Hunger Hotline. They can find food in any state, in any community in the country. And that number is 866-3-HUNGRY. And their database is humongous. They have imported all of the information from Find Help Idaho, and it's a great resource. Then I would gather documents, like your monthly bills, and then apply for SNAP if you're not on SNAP. But you can find food in the Treasure Valley every single day of the month, whether it's dinner, whether it's a box of food, anything. There's mobile pantries. There's lots of ways to find food, and the Hunger Hotline is a great resource just because it's one centralized location and they can direct you where to go.
And then sign up with your organization to learn how to talk to your lawmakers.
Absolutely. And we even have a class on how to talk to lawmakers, how to write letters to the editor, how to write op-eds, how to engage your legislative members and almost make them listen to you. I mean, they work for you. Don't be afraid to talk to a legislator because you are their boss.
Right.
And they work for you. They are your employee.
Very good point. Well, Dawn, thank you so much. Dawn Pierce, anti-hunger advocate, and also with the Hunger Coalition.
Idaho Hunger Relief Task Force.
Idaho Hunger Relief Task Force.
And Hunger Free America.
And Hunger Free America. And that number again is 866-3-HUNGRY. Great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.